Some of the best and brightest at Goldman Sachs are gathered here in New York today for a chance to win grants in support of their favorite nonprofits. Yahoo Finance's Julia Roche is there and just had an exclusive interview with Goldman CEO Lloyd Blankfein. Take a look.
Goldman Sachs Gives is a fund where the firm's managing directors can recommend donations to grants and donations for nonprofits that they care about. Since its inception in 2010, Goldman Sachs Gives has donated more than $1.3 billion to more than 6,000 organizations. Today, we're at the annual Analyst Impact Fund. It's the third one. It's the competition where the young analysts get to pitch the firm's senior partnership committee for grants for nonprofits and charities and communities where they care about. Lloyd Blankfein, CEO of Goldman Sachs, thank you so much for joining us.
Julia, thanks for coming today.
All right, Lloyd, we just watched 6 groups of analysts from all around the world pitch you and the senior committee on charities and nonprofits that they really care about. This is not a usual event that you hear about. So where did the idea come from?
Well, Goldman Sachs has long had a history of philanthropy. When I became a partner 30 years ago, I was congratulated, and then I was immediately taken aside and said, look, one of your obligations is to contribute philanthropic dollars and your time into driving philanthropies. And so they set up a charitable foundation, et cetera, roll the clock forward, and we've just become a bigger firm, a more diversified firm, and we've become spread around the world, but those traditions have continued. And so a few years ago, maybe about 10 years ago, we set up a process by which the firm's philanthropic dollars, apart from when people would give on their own, but our own philanthropic dollars would be allocated by partners of the firm, each partner getting an allocation where he or she would allocate it to the philanthropies of their choice. But what we decided to do, that it didn't feel democratic enough to us, and we decided to open it up to younger people in the firm. And so what we did was we evolved, in effect, competitions. You can't get too far away from the core of Goldman Sachs, whereby analyst groups would get together, collect among themselves, and with teamwork would craft presentations where they would present their best ideas for how our philanthropic dollars would be best spent. And so to the top group, we allocate $150,000 of philanthropic dollars for their particular charity. On down, when we have 6 groups, I think we started with something like 66 teams of people from all over the world with a range of charities. I think you've seen some of them demonstrated here. Clean water in India, to cures for tuberculosis, and the last mile cures for tuberculosis, to better construction techniques for housing. And so the idea is to fund these things through the allocation of these dollars.
Right. Well, it's not every day that a young person gets to pitch senior leaders at their firm. So what is it, generally speaking, that stands out to you when you're listening to a pitch?
Well, in general, sometimes you try to, I marvel at just how articulate these kids are, how the presentation skills, and I have to almost see through it, because sometimes the people are so impressive that I'm just thinking, my God, could I ever have done this at any point in my life, had the confidence to get up in front of these, in this case, an auditorium, and of course, there are auditoriums all over the Goldman Sachs network that are tuned into this, and they do such a great job. But really, one of our core competencies is supposed to be, we're supposed to look through that, see what qualifies, and really what is really doable. Because a lot of times you can create a narrative and a story, but these are real dollars that are being spent, and we'd like every dollar to have an impact of $10, not every dollar to have an impact of 10 cents. And so we're kind of ruthless in requiring things that are proven, that will work, where we think that we'll get a lot of leverage for our investment. Just like in our core commercial activities, we want to see the same thing out of our philanthropic activities.
Well, let's reflect on your career. You joined in 1982 through J. Aaron and Co., and you worked your way up. Did you ever have that moment where you had to speak up or give a presentation to a senior leader at the firm?
I did, and I can't remember a moment where I wasn't scared to death doing it. And I'm thinking to myself, boy, who are these people? I mean, we get, again, the success of Goldman Sachs. Look, we're not in the refinery business. We don't have big factories where we churn out big machines. I mean, the whole the whole enterprise of Goldman Sachs hinges on people and the ability to recruit people. And you see this crowd here today. They're distributed all over they're teams that are all over the world. We had teams from Dallas and San Francisco, and people from Hong Kong and Singapore, Indonesians making their case. And the teams themselves, the different members of the teams are also people who work together, but they live in different countries. And so I think the success of Goldman Sachs has always hinged on being able to recruit and retain terrific people. And I'm telling you, this is the best reflection of that. And sometimes, this is all extra credit. In the course of their jobs, in fulfilling their ambitions to grow in their career, they do our core commercial activity, and you could see the motivation. But here, not only do you see the capability of these people, I want to think of them as kids, but you see the motivation to do this, because this is all done after their day job, and very often at Goldman Sachs, your day job takes about 14 hours. And so they work very hard at this, which is something checks a box for us, and they're also capable as heck, and they've identified great investment opportunities in the philanthropic sense.
Well, I do want to talk about talent, and I do want to kind of dig in on your own career. You're the son of a postal worker. You put yourself through college. You did grow up in public housing. In a lot of ways, you do represent the American dream. If you were starting out today, do you still see the same opportunity?
I really do. It's not perfect. In fact, it's quite imperfect, but it always has been. In other words, it's progress. You can be a critic and carp at this is wrong and that's wrong. And let me tell you, I could just go all day long and only tell you the problems and things that are wrong. But there are a lot of things that are right too. I still think that there's great opportunities. Everybody harks back to some golden age, which wasn't that, really wasn't that golden, in mid-century. Really, before there was such an awareness of gender rights, civil rights, to the same extent that, we're aware of the problems that we have today, and I don't want to diminish them, but the opportunities are better than they were, and there's plenty of opportunity to make them better still. And so I prefer to focus on that. And at one level, if a kid today wants to start a business, gosh, you can get your technology on the cheap, you can get office space, really, you can rent office space very cheaply. Your financing comes through channels. And it's, kind of easier for somebody who takes the course that I've taken, which is more of an entrepreneurial one, to do that today compared to a generation ago, and certainly for several generations ago. But I don't want to minimize the fact, if you don't get into the position where you are aware of these opportunities, for example, if you grow up in the lower strata of society, it's still quite hard. I still think the safety net is higher than it once was. And so but I'm not going to challenge the notion that, there are issues with equality, and some of those things have worsened over time, but a lot has gotten better too. And
one thing about Goldman Sachs today, you even said that you all are a technology company. You have recruited a lot of folks who are coming in from STEM backgrounds. Now, how do you compete today against firms in Silicon Valley? How does Goldman compete for the best and brightest?
We do. And I say, let me modify that. We're a technology firm in a kind of way, but the way I wouldn't characterize that today. We're an investment bank, but to be a modern investment bank, really you have to embed technology, algorithms in your trading ideas, being able to lever yourself through technology. Otherwise, you won't be a successful investment bank. Like Amazon, the retail and consumer part of Amazon is a consumer store that embeds technology. So is Walmart now. You can't think of one as a technology and contrast to the other being a consumer firm. They're both consumer firms, and to be successful, you have to be good at embedding technology in your business, just as we've had to become in order to do our core undertaking of being a good investment bank. And so that's how it is. And so we recruit in the marketplace, and what we think we offer kids, as you can see, this is the Analyst Impact Fund. But not just in their philanthropic undertakings, but in their commercial we advertise the fact that this is the place where you can have the best impact on your life. It's a kind of a place where there's a lot of visibility for people. Young people make decisions that have an impact. We pick people to finance. And guess what? We pick people that we won't and projects that we won't finance. That is a very, very heavy responsibility. We are involved in all industries. We finance people in industrial, in natural resources, in the technology area. People come to us and they say, will you invest your own money? Which is an important validation for people. And if we do that, then other people put their money in and things work. We're kind of, in some ways, the invisible hand you read about in classic economics, where we help money come from the people who have it to the people who need it in order to create their enterprises and create jobs and create the kinds of products and services that benefit everybody.
Well, speaking of economics, let's talk about the economy. You know, the data has been looking pretty good, yet some economists are saying that we're due for a recession. So, Lloyd, what is your outlook for the economy?
Well, I predict that the business cycle hasn't been repealed, and they were at some point due for a recession, but there is nothing that looks like it's going to be tomorrow. This cycle has been a long time, but when you look at rates, when you look at the level of, relatively low level of inflation, you look at GDP growth, you look at employment situation, even some incremental increase in what people are paying for in wages for people, it's a pretty benign environment in the near term. And of course, in the long term, my core business, my job at Goldman Sachs is to think about all the things that could go wrong. And I could spend 2 days of telling you the things I'm worried about. But my base case is that the near term looks kind of benign and in fact kind of positive relative to the other periods in which I've worked.
Right. Well, you often say that you spend 98% of your time thinking about that 2% that could go wrong. So, Lloyd, what is that 2% for you right now?
Oh, my goodness. I'm worried about, anything having to do with cyber. I'm worried about the impact of rate rises, whether that happens in a controlled way, and what the impact of higher rates are to asset valuations and therefore people's portfolios and the reaction to that. I worry about financing, to some extent, financing the countries in Southern Europe. I worry about Brexit and the impact on the EU and other countries that might be distressed there. I worry about macro and geopolitical events. In general, and so there's no lack of projects at Goldman Sachs in the risk management sphere.
Well, Lloyd Blankfein, CEO and Chairman of Goldman Sachs, thank you so much.
Julia, thank you very much.
All right, some great insights there from Lloyd Blankfein of Goldman Sachs. And you know what? Julia hustled back from downtown, and she is here with us now. Thanks for coming back and making it. Great interview. What were you surprised by anything he said or didn't say?
Look, there are so many questions that I wish I could have had the time to ask Lloyd Blankfein. I could just list them off for you. One thing that did surprise me that stood out in there was the pursuit of talent, especially when you're competing against big Silicon Valley firms. Yeah. And look, he has in the past said Goldman Sachs is a technology company, but I thought that was a really smart take that Goldman Sachs is an investment bank, but you have to leverage technology. Every industry nowadays has to leverage technology.
And what about his thoughts on a recession? Definitely not a naysayer for him. The glass is half full, I guess, when it comes to the economy.
Oh, look, at some point we're going to have a recession. Nobody knows when that's going to happen, so I guess he's not going to make a prediction. It's not going to happen tomorrow. Look, the data for now is strong. It's there. But he does often say that he spends 98% of his time worrying about that 2%. Lloyd Blankfein looks at himself as being a risk manager. Mm-hmm. So he did list off a lot of those risks out there, from cybersecurity to geopolitical risk as well.
You know what I found interesting? That among that long list, he didn't tick off a possible trade war.
Yeah, that was one thing that we didn't hear about. And it's interesting, Goldman Sachs, when you think of the firm, who are their clients? Big multinational companies. He's traveled the world. He's met with world leaders. So that would have been one topic that I wish he could have weighed in on, or at least listed.
Yeah, but basically he's been a lifer at Goldman Sachs, right? As you say, he started in the 80s.
He started in 1982. Yeah. Initially, he was denied from Goldman Sachs. He did not get in initially when he applied. So he started with J. Aron, which is a commodities business. They brought him on, and then he really worked his way up, headed up FIC, became the COO and president, and he's been CEO for 12 years. Yeah. People are talking succession, so who knows what will happen with
That'll be in your next interview.
But one thing I will say is he'll want to pass on some knowledge to the next person.